"You've got to be kidding me," Sam grumbled, glancing at the clock for the umpteenth time. "It's not even lunch, and the pile of returns is already up to my elbow." The quaint bookstore, nestled between a vintage sofa shop and a seasonal fireplace emporium, had been bustling with activity since early morning. The holiday season had brought a peculiar mix of scents: old paper and leather, wafts of pine from the freshly cut Christmas trees, and the faint, comforting smell of burning firewood. It was a cozy cocoon that drew people in from the cold, and they all seemed to be returning their summer reads for something a little more festive. Sam's eyes scanned the line of customers snaking through the narrow aisles, each clutching an armful of books they were eager to exchange for something that better suited the chilly weather outside. The bell above the door jingled merrily as a gust of cold air announced the arrival of yet another patron, her nose pink from the chill. She stepped in, her eyes widening at the sight of the towering bookshelves and the warm, inviting glow of the fireplace in the corner. The woman, wrapped in a scarf that looked like it had been knitted by a particularly colorful octopus, approached the counter with a hopeful smile. "I've got a whole list of books to return," she said, her breath fogging up the lenses of her wire-rimmed glasses. "But I think I'll need to find some new ones to take home with me today." Sam is overwhelmed with book returns at their bookstore during the holiday season, which shares a cozy atmosphere with the neighboring shops. Customers seek festive reads to replace their summer books, and a new patron enters, eager to exchange hers and find new ones. Sam nodded, his smile tight but genuine. "No problem," he said, his voice a little strained from the constant stream of greetings and instructions. He took the stack of books from her, scanning the barcodes with a beep that seemed to echo through the quiet store. The woman's eyes flitted around the room, taking in the shelves filled with books that spanned from floor to ceiling, the comfortable armchairs arranged around the fireplace, and the small table laden with a selection of gourmet teas and biscuits for those who liked to linger. As he worked through the returns, Sam couldn't help but feel a twinge of envy. He longed to be the one curled up with a good book and a steaming cup of tea, not the one stuck behind the counter. But the holiday rush was a double-edged sword. While it was exhausting, it also brought a sense of purpose and joy to the usually quiet shop. The chime of the bell grew more frequent as the day went on, and the pile of returns grew steadily higher. The scent of pine grew stronger as the owner, Mrs. Jenkins, brought in another fresh tree. She winked at Sam as she set it down next to the fireplace. "It's going to be a busy one," she said, her cheeks rosy from the cold. "But think of it as a warm-up for the winter sales."
Sam chuckled, the sound muffled by the stack of books he was trying to organize. "If this is the warm-up, I might need a nap before the main event." Despite the chaos, he enjoyed the buzz of the holiday season. It brought a sense of community and cheer that the dreary winter months often lacked. The chime of the bell grew to a crescendo as more people sought refuge from the cold, their eyes lighting up at the sight of the new arrivals displayed prominently on the front table, books wrapped in red ribbon and adorned with sprigs of holly. Mrs. Jenkins bustled around the store, her laughter mixing with the crackling fire and the gentle hum of conversation. She had a knack for placing just the right book in a customer's hand, her suggestions often leading to impromptu book clubs forming by the fireplace. Sam watched as she led a group of regulars to the back corner, where a new line of cozy mystery novels had just been delivered. They chatted excitedly, their eyes alight with the promise of solving fictional crimes from the comfort of their armchairs. The door chimed again, and a young girl with a mischievous twinkle in her eye sprinted to the counter, a dog-eared copy of A Christmas Carol in her hand. "I read this every year," she exclaimed, her cheeks flushed with excitement. "But I accidentally left it at my grandma's house, and I need a new one for tonight's read-along." Sam couldn't help but smile at her enthusiasm. He plucked a fresh copy from the display and handed it over. "This one's on the house," he said, adding it to the pile of returns. "It's always good to keep the tradition going." The girl's eyes widened. "Really? Consider it an early Christmas present," Sam said, winking back. He knew the joy of finding comfort in a well-loved story during the holidays. He watched her skip away, her book held tightly to her chest, and felt a bit of his own holiday spirit rekindle. The store's warmth was a stark contrast to the cold outside, and the flurry of activity inside was a reminder that the year was coming to a close. Each book that left the shelves and each new one that took its place was a symbol of a story shared and a memory made. The crackle of the fireplace grew more inviting as the shadows grew longer, and the soft jazz playing in the background seemed to weave in and out of the conversations, adding a rhythm to the day's chaos. A young couple entered, holding hands and whispering to each other, their cheeks rosy from the cold. They approached the counter with a look of excitement and nervousness. "We're looking for a book," the man said, glancing around the store. "It's our first Christmas together, and we want to start a tradition of reading to each other by the fireplace." Sam nodded, his smile genuine. "We have a wonderful selection of holiday classics and romantic tales. How about we start with something like The Night Before Christmas?" The woman's eyes lit up at the suggestion, and they both nodded eagerly.
As the day progressed, the bookstore grew more crowded, the air thick with the mingling of chatter and the occasional laugh. The line at the counter never shortened, but Sam felt a growing sense of accomplishment with each book he found for a customer. He listened to snippets of conversations, families planning their reading list for the holidays, friends exchanging book recommendations, and colleagues swapping stories about their favorite winter reads. The exchange of books was more than just a transaction, it was a sharing of experiences and a creation of new ones. The smell of pine grew richer as the afternoon turned to evening, and the soft glow of the pendant lights cast a warm, golden hue over the stacks. The fireplace crackled away, casting flickering shadows across the floor. Customers curled into the sofas, their faces illuminated by the warm light, lost in the pages of their newfound companions. It was in these moments that Sam felt most alive. Connecting people with the perfect book was his silent gift to the world. As the last of the stragglers left, their arms laden with literary treasures, Sam let out a sigh of relief. He looked over the empty returns bin and the organized piles of books to be restocked, feeling a sense of pride in the day's work. Mrs. Jenkins appeared beside him, her eyes sparkling with the same joy. "You handled that like a pro," she said, patting his back. "Now, how about you take the last hour to choose something for yourself?" Sam couldn't resist the offer. He wandered the aisles, his fingertips grazing over the spines of countless books, each whispering a promise of adventure or solace. He found himself in the science fiction section, where he had spent countless hours as a child. His eyes fell upon a title that had eluded him for years, a rare first edition of Dune. His heart skipped a beat as he pulled it out, feeling the weight of the book in his hands. The cover was slightly worn, but the pages were pristine, untouched by the ravages of time. He opened it, breathing in the scent of aged paper and ink. The story had always resonated with him, a tale of survival and destiny that mirrored his own journey with the bookstore. It had been his sanctuary during his parents' tumultuous divorce, a place where he could lose himself in other worlds while the real one fell apart around him. Mrs. Jenkins saw the book in his hand and her smile grew knowing. "Ah, a classic choice," she said, her eyes twinkling. "You know, that was my husband's favorite. He used to read it every winter." Sam nodded, feeling a sense of kinship with the man he had never met. "It's always been on my list," he murmured, gently placing the book back on the shelf. He had his pick of the litter, but somehow, it didn't feel right to claim something so precious when there were so many other books waiting for a loving home.
Mrs. Jenkins leaned in conspiratorially. "Why don't you take it home with you tonight?" she suggested, her voice barely above a whisper. "Consider it a gift from the bookstore. A little something to thank you for all your hard work." Sam hesitated for a moment, feeling the weight of the book in his hand, and then nodded. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'll take good care of it." With the book tucked under his arm, Sam felt a newfound warmth spread through his chest. He made his way to the back room, where the employees had set up a small area to relax during their breaks. The room was lined with shelves of books that had been donated or damaged, their spines a kaleidoscope of color and memories. He sat down in the worn armchair by the window, the lights from the street outside casting a soft glow into the room. The bell jingled once more, and Mrs. Jenkins called out a cheery farewell to the last of the customers. She joined Sam in the back, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "Let's not tell anyone," she whispered, pulling out a bottle of whiskey from behind a stack of books. "A little something to toast the end of the day." They clinked their mugs together, his filled with tea, hers with a generous splash of the amber liquid, and sat in companionable silence, the warmth of the bookstore wrapping around them like a blanket. The flurries outside had turned to a steady snowfall, painting a serene tableau against the window. Sam took a sip of his tea, feeling the warmth spread down his throat and into his chest. It was moments like these that made the endless hours and piles of returns worthwhile. Mrs. Jenkins leaned back in her chair, her eyes drifting to the book in Sam's hand. "You know," she began, her voice softer than the crackle of the fireplace, "the holidays can be a tough time for a lot of people. Books are like little fires in the darkness, offering warmth and light." Sam nodded, understanding all too well the solace that books could provide. His own holidays had often been spent alone, his nose buried in the pages of a good book while the rest of the world moved in a blur of lights and laughter. The bookstore had become his refuge, a place where the turning of pages marked the passage of time more than the ticking of a clock. They sat for a while longer, watching the snowflakes dance in the streetlights, before Sam stood up, the first edition of Dune, feeling like a treasure in his grasp. "Thank you," he said, his voice filled with a mix of gratitude and something deeper. "I'll read it by the fire tonight." Mrs. Jenkins' smile was gentle. "I'm sure your parents would be proud," she said, patting his arm. "Now go on, get home. You've earned it."
With a final nod, Sam pulled on his coat and stepped out into the night. The snow crunched beneath his boots as he made his way home, the book tucked safely inside his pocket. The cold air was bracing, but the warmth of the bookstore, and the promise of a good story, lived on in his heart. He felt a sense of belonging, of purpose, that had been missing for so long. The walk home was short but invigorating, the cold air sharpening his senses. As he approached his apartment, the glow of the windows beckoned him like a second homecoming. Inside, the scent of cinnamon and pine wafted from the kitchen, where a pot of mulled cider simmered on the stove. His cat, Mr. Whiskers, wound around his legs, purring in greeting. The living room was already set up with a plush armchair and a stack of blankets next to the crackling fireplace. Sam set the book on the side table, his eyes tracing the familiar lines of the room that had become his sanctuary. The walls were lined with bookshelves, each one a testament to the hours he had spent in the company of characters from every walk of life. He knew that tonight, as he curled up with June, he would be joining a legacy of readers who had found refuge in its pages. He poured a mug of the steaming cider, the warmth seeping through his hands, and took a sip. The sweetness mingled with the spice, a perfect complement to the chilly evening. With a sigh of contentment, he sank into the chair, the flames of the fireplace casting a warm glow on the pages before him. The outside world was a distant murmur, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, Sam felt truly at peace. The words of the story swirled around him, weaving a tale of desert lands and ancient prophecy. He read until his eyes grew heavy and the fire burned low, the book spine cracking with the weight of 1,000 untold stories. As he closed his eyes, the warmth of the bookstore and the whispers of the pages filled his dreams, a reminder that no matter how cold the season, there was always warmth to be found in the right book. When Sam awoke the next morning, the world outside was a winter wonderland. He stretched, feeling the ache of a good night's sleep and the promise of a day off. The bookstore was closed on Sundays, a tradition Mrs. Jenkins had held since she had first opened its doors. She believed in the sacredness of rest and the importance of family, even if it meant foregoing a day of profits. With a yawn, Sam padded into the kitchen, Mr. Whiskers following closely behind. He filled the kettle with water and set it on the stove, the hiss of the gas flame a comforting sound in the quiet apartment. While he waited for the water to boil, he pulled out his phone to check the messages he had ignored the previous day. There was one from his sister, Rachel, inviting him to a last-minute Christmas dinner.
The invitation was unexpected, but Sam felt a spark of excitement. Rachel had moved away after their parents' divorce, seeking a fresh start. Their relationship had been strained since, a tapestry of missed calls and forced cheer during the holidays. Yet, as he read her message, filled with hope and the promise of mended bridges, he knew he couldn't refuse. The day passed in a flurry of preparation. He scoured his bookshelves for the perfect gift for Rachel, finally settling on a collection of poetry that she had loved as a child. With the book wrapped in paper that smelled faintly of pine and cinnamon, he set out into the crisp winter air. The snow had turned the streets into a serene tableau, the occasional footprint the only evidence of life. The walk to Rachel's apartment was a short one, but the anticipation grew with each step. His heart thudded in his chest as he climbed the stairs, the scent of roasting turkey and baking cookies filling the hallway. When he knocked on the door, it swung open to reveal Rachel's smiling face, her eyes red-rimmed from what he assumed were tears of joy. Her living room was a reflection of their childhood home, decorated with the same meticulous care that their mother had always taken. A tree stood in the corner, strung with lights that twinkled like stars, and a garland of pine cones and holly adorned the mantel. The warmth of the room washed over him, and he felt the tension of the year begin to melt away. They sat down at the small table, laden with a feast that seemed to have been prepared by an invisible army of elves. Rachel's eyes shone with excitement as she spoke of her life, her voice filled with the same enthusiasm he had heard in the bookstore. They talked of books and movies, of friends and futures, and for the first time in years, the silence between them was comfortable rather than awkward. The meal was filled with laughter and the clinking of glasses, the weight of their shared history lightened by the warmth of the room. They shared stories of their separate holidays, each one a thread in the tapestry of their lives. And when Rachel opened her gift, the pages fluttered like a leaf in the wind, revealing the book that had been a bastion of their shared past. Her eyes filled with tears as she hugged him tightly. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice muffled against his shoulder. "I thought I had lost this." Sam held her, feeling the warmth of the bookstore in her embrace. "It's just a book," he said, "but I hope it brings you as much comfort as it has me." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of conversation and good cheer, the chill of the outside world forgotten. As they said their goodbyes, Rachel's hand in his, Sam realized that the bookstore wasn't just his sanctuary. It was a beacon of light that connected people through the power of words.
And as he trudged back through the snow, the cold air feeling less bitter, the bookstore's warmth remained in his heart. The holiday season had brought more than just a rush of customers. It had brought a reminder of the joy of sharing stories and the warmth of connection. He knew that when the store opened again tomorrow, the pile of returns would be waiting, and the cycle would start anew. But he also knew that each book he handled was a thread in the fabric of someone's life, a piece of their story intertwining with his. And that was what made the job more than just work. It was a connection to the world outside his own four walls. The snow had stopped falling when Sam reached the bookstore, leaving the world coated in a thick blanket of white. He took a moment to appreciate the quiet beauty before unlocking the door and stepping inside. The scent of the pine and the lingering warmth from the fireplace greeted him like an old friend. He placed Rachel's book on the counter, a silent promise to keep it safe until she needed it again. With a steaming mug of tea in hand, he began to reshelve the books, his thoughts drifting to the people who had held them, the stories they had shared, and the memories they had made. Each book was a gateway to a different world, a silent companion during the long winter nights. He found himself smiling as he worked, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. As the last book found its home on the shelf, Sam took a step back, surveying his work. The bookstore looked just as it had the night before, but something had shifted within him. The books weren't just objects to be bought and sold, they were bridges to be built, connections to be made. And he was the silent architect, constructing these literary pathways that would lead people to joy, solace, and maybe even a bit of magic. With the store in order, he settled into the armchair by the fireplace, the whispers of the flames a comforting lullaby. He pulled Dune from his pocket, the pages slightly crinkled from Rachel's tears, and opened it once more. As he began to read, The words pulled him into the desert sands of Arrakis, but his heart remained firmly in the warm embrace of the bookstore. He knew that come what may, he would always find peace in the company of books and the warmth of the fireplace. The holiday season had reminded him that sometimes the most important stories were the ones you lived. The days that followed were a blur of customers, book recommendations, and the occasional quiet moment by the fireplace. Sam found himself looking forward to the familiar faces that graced the shop, each one a piece of a larger narrative that unfolded with every page turned. The bookstore had become more than just a place of business. It was a communal hearth where people could share their stories, their hopes, and their dreams.
One evening, as the last rays of sunlight painted the sky a fiery orange, a young man approached the counter, his eyes scanning the shelves with a desperate intensity. "I'm looking for something," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. "A book that can help me understand." His words trailed off, and Sam could see the pain etched on his face. Sam set down the book he was holding and leaned closer, his eyes meeting the man's with a gentle understanding. "What is it you're trying to understand?" he asked, his voice soft. The man hesitated before finally speaking, his words tumbling out in a rush. "My grandpa passed away," he said, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "And I don't know how to grieve." Sam's heart ached for the young man, knowing the weight of such a loss. He reached out and placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "You're in the right place," he said, his voice filled with warmth. "Let's see what we can find." Together, they navigated the aisles, Sam pulling out titles after title, each one offering a different perspective on loss and healing. They spoke of love and family, of the indelible marks left by those we lose. The bookstore, with its towering shelves and cozy corners, became a sanctuary for the young man's grief. Finally, they found it, a slim volume titled The Book of Lost Things. The man took it in his hands, his eyes scanning the cover as if searching for a message. Sam watched as the tension in his shoulders eased, the book seeming to whisper a promise of solace. As the man left with his newfound companion, Sam felt a sense of accomplishment that went beyond the sale of a book. He had provided a spark of comfort in the cold, dark months of winter. It was in these moments that the true magic of the bookstore revealed itself, the power to heal and connect, to warm the soul when the world outside was cold and unforgiving. The holidays grew closer, the air thick with the scent of cinnamon and pine. The bookstore's windows were adorned with lights and festive garlands, and the fireplace burned steadily, casting a warm glow into the street. Sam watched as families and friends wandered in, their eyes searching for the perfect story to share. He knew that for many, the books they found here would become part of their holiday traditions, a piece of the tapestry that bound them together. And when the final day of the year arrived, Sam stood in the quiet store, the last embers of the fireplace dying down. He held Dune in his hand, the story now as much a part of him as the bookstore itself. He knew that the year ahead would bring challenges, but he also knew that within these walls, he had a purpose.
With a sigh, he locked the door and headed home, the book tucked safely under his arm. The snow crunched beneath his feet, the cold air a stark contrast to the warmth of the bookstore. Yet, as he stepped into the night, the warmth of the fireplace remained with him, a beacon of hope and a promise of more stories to come. The new year would bring its own share of returns and restocks, but Sam felt ready. He had rediscovered the joy of sharing stories, the warmth of connection, and the profound impact of a well-chosen book. As he climbed the stairs to his apartment, Mr. Whiskers waiting at the top, he knew that the bookstore was not just his place of work, but a bastion of warmth in the frosty world outside. In the quiet of the night, the bookstore's glow a memory, Sam curled up on his couch with Dune, the whispers of the fireplace still echoing in his mind. The pages turned, and he was transported to a world of sand and spice, of battles and destinies. Yet, amidst the grandeur of the tale, he found a quiet peace, a reminder of the simple joys of reading and the profound connections it could forge. The following morning, the chime of the bookstore's bell grew more frequent, each new customer bringing a breath of cold air that seemed to carry with it the promise of new beginnings. Sam moved through the aisles with a newfound grace, his eyes lighting up as he recommended titles after title, knowing that each book could be a beacon in someone's darkest night. Days grew longer, and the pile of returns grew smaller. Winter's icy grip began to loosen, and with it, the urgency of the holiday rush. Yet the bookstore remained a haven, a place where the warmth of the fireplace and the embrace of a good story never wavered. It was here that Sam had found his place in the world, connecting the threads of lives through the pages of books. As the first signs of spring began to peek through the windows, Sam found himself eagerly anticipating the season's new arrivals. The bookstore's transformation from a winter wonderland to a springtime oasis was a reminder of the cyclical nature of life, the constant ebb and flow of stories and the people they touched. The chilly mornings grew brighter, the air hinting at the thaw to come. Sam knew that the warmth of the bookstore would soon be replaced by the gentle kiss of the sun on the pages of books read in the park. Yet, the fireplace remained a steadfast sentinel, a symbol of comfort and warmth that never truly disappeared. The months rolled on, and with them, the seasons changed. The bookstore evolved, its shelves a canvas for the vibrant colors of spring, the lazy afternoons of summer, the fiery hues of autumn. Yet, the warmth of the hearth remained, a constant through the shifting tides of the year.
In the quiet moments between customers, Sam found himself reflecting on the past year, the laughter, the tears, the shared stories that had made the bookstore more than just a place to buy and sell. It was a place where hearts were mended, friendships forged, and lives forever changed. And as the final pages of Dune whispered their secrets to him, Sam felt a sense of belonging that went beyond the walls of the bookstore. He was part of a legacy, a silent guardian of the written word, ensuring that every story found its reader, and every reader found their place in the world. The bell chimed once more, and Sam looked up, ready to greet the next person in need of a literary embrace. With a warm smile, he stepped from behind the counter, the book tucked safely under his arm, ready to share the warmth of the bookstore with whoever walked through the door.